Dill, and this is ANA, reporting to you with breaking news. African terrorist group Boko Haram recently affiliated with ISIS and anti-Balaka strike again. With all these terrorist groups popping up, we've sent our reporter Aaron to Africa to give us more information.
Boko Haram is a dangerous terrorist group in Nigeria. They are an Islamic group that fights for a purely Muslim state by way of assassinations of Christians and suicide bombings. They're led by Muhammad Yusuf until 2009 when he was killed. It wasn't until their new leader, Abu Bakr Shaiku, that they became radical and started to kill people.
Now what about the other group, anti-Balaka?
Now the anti-Balakas, on the other hand, are a Christian terrorist group who mainly seek revenge on other organizations that attack Christian churches and fight for a total Muslim state. This specific group seeks the exact opposite, where they want to abolish Muslim teachings and preserve Christian ideology.
Thanks for that, Aaron. Now that I think about it, this all seems pretty similar to the Holocaust. With all these murders and terroristic acts, how would you compare and contrast these groups with Hitler and the Nazis in terms of targeting religious groups?
As we know, the Holocaust was a period of persecution and extermination of European Jews by Nazi Germany. With Hitler's rise to power in 1933, Jews were terrorized in anti-Jewish riots, forced into ghettos, stripped of their property, and were sent to concentration camps where they were killed in gas chambers or worked to death.
To help us better understand both groups and how they compare to the Nazis, we have called in history analyst and journalist Annie Vu.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you for having me. These groups are very similar to Hitler and the Nazis. First, we can begin with Boko Haram. Like Hitler, Abu Bakr Shaiku, the leader of Boko Haram, began to fight for a Muslim state in Nigeria. Making Nigeria a purely Muslim state is similar to what Hitler did in Germany, but instead of having a desired Aryan state, Boko Haram aims to have a purely Muslim state. Also, Boko Haram compares to Hitler because they have been targeting Christians just as Hitler targeted Jews. Boko Haram has been targeting religious figures and religious institutions. This includes church bombings, along with the kidnapping of high-profile civilians. The acts of destruction towards religious buildings is similar to Hitler's Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht is a night where Nazis went to destroy Jewish property in synagogues. Furthermore, while destroying churches, they murdered innocent people in the building.
Thanks for that, Annie. Now, on the topic of the destruction of churches, we have a real-life story of a man who survived a Boko Haram attack in a church. We have sent our reporter Aaron Lerner for more on this story.
In 2012, Ikenna Zuribe, a part of Nigeria's Christian minority, was attacked by Boko Haram inside his church in Mumbai during his peaceful prayer. Boko Haram entered the church and shot everyone up with AK-47s. Out of dozens of people, Zuribe was the only one to survive, undergoing countless surgeries to restructure his face. Although he has recovered to the best of his ability, he still is in fear and prays that an end comes soon to Boko Haram.
I hope all is well for the survivor and his family. So earlier, we mentioned a second group, anti-Balaka, that has similar actions and ideals to the Nazis. How does anti-Balaka compare to the Nazis?
The first thing Hitler and anti-Balaka have in common is that they have both created massive genocide. UN peacekeepers were unable to stop the slaughter of 800,000 civilians in 3 bloody months. Of course, the scale of genocide from anti-Balaka is nowhere near the scale of how many died in the Holocaust, but anti-Balaka has still caused genocide. What is really interesting is that Hitler, anti-Balaka, and Boko Haram were all trying to create a state with purely one religion. Anti-Balaka is trying to drive out all the Muslims out of the Central African Republic in order to maintain a Christian-only region.
Great insight, Annie. Now let's go to Aaron, who's live with a story on an anti-Balaka attack and the survivor.
Early on the morning of February 1st, anti-Balaka descended on the town of Gwen in the Central African Republic and killed at least 27 Muslims, mostly women, children, and the elderly, with guns and machetes. One survivor tried to flee with his 10-year-old son, Amaru Boba. He was shot in the right leg, and he fell down, but they finished him off with a machete. His father had no choice but to run.
What a devastating story. Now that we know how these two groups compare to the ideals and tactics of the Nazis, can we also take a look at how they contrast?
On December 22nd, 2011, 3 days before Christmas, Deborah, a 12-year-old Nigerian native, experienced something that a young girl should never have to witness. 3 men belonging to Boko Haram entered her home while her father and mother were there. They stormed in, grabbing Deborah's father and demanding him to deny his Christian faith. Her father refused, so they gave him one more chance. Yet again, he denied, so one of them fired 3 shots at his chest. Her brother, shocked by what he had just witnessed, questioned their decision. Seconds later, her brother was also shot. Clearly, Boko Haram doesn't have the support Hitler had, since they have to go door-to-door threatening civilians. Let's send it back to Annie and Nicole to find out how they further contrast.
Although Boko Haram and the Nazis have some things in common, they are very different groups. Boko Haram differs from the Nazi Party because they don't have the support that Hitler did. The State of Department estimates the number of Boko Haram fighters in the hundreds to low thousands. The difference of Nazis and Boko Haram fighters is the reason why the Boko Haram movement is nowhere near as widespread as the Nazi movement was. Another difference between the two groups is that Hitler set out to change the ways that schools taught children to think of Jews, while Boko Haram uses schools as a place to reinforce the idea of stopping Western influence from tainting the original Islamic religion by setting fires to schools that teach Western ideas and attacking universities in northern Nigeria.
Interesting. So it seems to me that although both groups had similar angles, their plans of attack and methods on how they sent their overall message of their mission were very different. Well, on the subject, could you please continue on how anti-Balaka contrasts with the Nazis as well?
Anti-Balaka takes violence to a whole new level. They pulled out 45 Muslim men and boys and forced them to lie on the ground. Then they shot them and then hacked them to death. It's a pretty gruesome act to literally tear someone apart. The Nazis and anti-Balaka had a different approach as to how they were going to exterminate their victims. The Nazis used machine guns, crematoriums, and gas chambers, while anti-Balaka used machine guns and machetes. Another difference between the groups is that the Nazis had a plan of attack on the Jews, while anti-Balaka attacks were sporadic, violent attacks across the nation. Overall, these two groups had two very different approaches as to how they were going to execute their plans.
Well, that's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching ANA News. I'm Nicole Dill, and I'll see you next time.